What's up, everyone? Welcome to Tuesday Live. We're here. Phil's not with me today, unfortunately. We had a good time last week. If you missed last week's live stream, we built a small pedal board for one of my best friends, and it turned out great. So we are still running a giveaway on that. So you can find more information either in that episode or linked down below. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about transitioning from a beginner to an intermediate guitarist. I got an email a couple of days ago from a guy named Richard, and he said this: "Hi Rhett, enjoy the channel. Even though most of it is beyond my level of understanding, there are a lot of us intermediate guys that feel sort of left out. We buy a lot of lessons and whatnot to try and find some secret to help us get better. I'm guessing we probably just need to practice. But practice what? We could really use some practical advice. That being said, could you recommend some exercises for finger strength and dexterity? Keep up the great work, Richard." Well, I appreciate the email, Richard, and hopefully you are here in the stream today, because we're going to cover it. We're going to talk about basically what makes an intermediate guitarist. And this is kind of a tricky subject because it's sort of tough to gauge yourself and where you are as a guitar player, no matter how long you've played or what you've done. I don't know how to classify myself as a guitar player. What's up?
Oh, nothing.
Oh, sorry.
By the way, I'm here.
Yeah.
Jazz School Chris.
Yeah, Jazz School Chris is now turned producer Chris. We're experimenting with our live stream setup here, trying to take some of the work of the live stream out of my hands and give it to Chris. So, yeah, it's a weird thing though to try and evaluate where you are as a player. Are you a beginner? Are you intermediate? Are you a pro? Are you advanced? Whatever. So what we're going to do today is, I think, talk about and cover some of the subjects and some of the things that I think most intermediate guitar players should have under their belt, right? And this is not stuff that's going to be crazy complicated or difficult, but I think it can serve as a good sort of guidepost to work towards. If you are a beginner or you've been playing for a few years and you don't have something to work towards, I think these things we're going to cover today can help you out. So this also is a Q&A. So if you have questions, I have the chat pulled up here. You can @me @Rhett Shull. It'll highlight your question orange so I can read it. Chris will also be grabbing questions, and you can also leave a top chat donation, which I believe we already had one at the top of the show. So, yeah. So the first thing I think we should talk about here is chords. Understanding your triad voicings up and down the neck. I think this is something that is really, really important for intermediate guitar players to have a firm grasp on. So if you're not familiar, triads are 3-note chords. A major triad, like E major here, is a root, third, and fifth. But I can play this chord, I can play E major in plenty of different positions up and down the neck. Now, quick plug, I forgot to plug at the top. We have a few sales going on today. We have 10 coupons available to get 50% off of all of my courses. There's only 10. You can check out the link in the live chat. So if you're watching this live, you can have a swing at that. And then we're also running 30% off of the Fretboard Fundamentals course, 35% off the Fretboard Fundamentals course, sorry. And a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today, we go into more detail in that course, in the Fretboard Fundamentals course. So if this is something that you're interested in learning more about, you can check that course out and get 35% off of it. Quentin James in the chat says, "There's only 12 notes in the musical scale. After 40 years, you think I would have learned them all by now." Okay, so actually, let's talk about that first. One of the first things I think you should have an understanding of for an intermediate player to move from beginner to intermediate is the notes on the low E string and on the A string. And this is important because a lot of the chord voicings and the chord shapes that we're going to use and the triads and stuff that we're going to talk about are 5th string root triads and 6th string root triads. So if you know your notes between the open E string all the way up to the 12th fret on the E string and same thing on the A string, then you can identify where to play. And if you're stuck playing an open position, cowboy chords, right, where you have to capo up to play in a different key, this is one of the first steps to getting out of that rut, to being able to play anywhere on the neck. So that's really the first thing, is learn your notes on the fretboard. Ideally, you want to learn all the notes on the fretboard, but start here. When I used to teach guitar lessons, my students would get overwhelmed when I would say, yeah, you should learn all the notes on the fretboard because it's like 6 strings and 22, 21 frets, depending on what kind of guitar you have, maybe 24. It seems like a lot. But if you break it down into little chunks, little pieces, and just go one string at a time and in little 4 fret cells, right? So just go with the open E string, and then it's, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp. And just work on that. Just memorize those 5 notes. All right, same thing on the A string. And then as you get more comfortable, you can go up from there. So you can do it chromatically, which is 1 note at a time, like that. Or you can start with the fret markers, right? This is another really easy way to do it. So open E, 3rd fret is G, 5th fret is A, 7th fret is B, right? And start with those sort of milestones, those fret markers, to help you get that down.
Got a lot of questions about the guitar in the chat.
Oh yeah, okay. I thought we would. So yeah, this is a Vila, a Diego Vila. Diego is a builder based in Spain. I don't know where in Spain he is, but incredibly nice guy, incredibly cool guy. And I finally got to meet him at Winter NAMM last year. Well, no, 2 years ago now. Jeez, Winter NAMM 2020, man. And he loaned me this guitar. It came off the NAMM floor, and yeah, I've had it ever since. It's really cool. It's got the TV Jones. I forget which model these are, but it's really, really bright. And right now I'm going into my RSA 23. We might switch to the Marshall here in a little bit, but... fun guitar. We got a top chat. Hector, you consider yourself intermediate more than exercises. The most difficult piece for me is how to pull all the knowledge together and create music. That is one of the hardest things about playing instruments just in general. I mean, it's one thing to like learn the vocabulary, learn the... Well, it's kind of like writing a story, right? If you're going to write a story or write a novel, you need to have some understanding, some grasp of grammar and vocabulary and language and how to communicate your ideas to people. But knowing all that stuff, knowing a huge level of having a really deep understanding of vocabulary and grammar and structure and all this stuff doesn't mean you're going to write a great story. And music theory, I think, is the same way. I see music theory as like the vocabulary and the grammar. It's like the mechanics of a language. But just knowing those things doesn't make you a great musician or a great player, nor is it necessary. There's plenty of great players that didn't know the cage system or didn't know their harmonized major scale, right? Plenty of great musicians and writers and artists. So, I think there's a big... People get caught up in the whole theory discussion and debate online about like, should you learn theory? How much should you learn? And my answer is, however much you need to communicate your ideas effectively. That's it. Whether you're playing in a band, and that means you need to know the Nashville number system so you guys can communicate chord progressions really quick, or you just want to learn a couple cowboy chords and get through them, like, it's up to you. It doesn't matter. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a difference between like knowing theory, like in your head, like intellectually, and then, like you said, there's some guitar players who don't know the cage system, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But they definitely understand it like on an intuitive level that's personal to them, and they can play all those chords or they can play all that stuff.
Right.
But maybe they wouldn't be able to explain it to you,
Yeah.
in a verbal way.
Right.
But there's totally a difference between like knowing it like that and being able to just play it.
Right. So one of the next things I think we should talk about here, intermediate players, I think are able to play chords in different parts of the neck pretty quickly, pretty easily. This is one of the things that once I understood, we're talking about the cage system here in Triad, but once I kind of grasped this, it really unlocked a lot in my playing. And we're actually making a video course on this, a rhythm guitar course on this right now. John Q in Top Chat, thanks, man. No comment, just sending kudos for the fuzz of it. Oh yeah, we should talk about the fuzz shirts. Finally have merch. These shirts are available. Links in the description. Chris actually designed these. We have t-shirts, sweaters, all that stuff is available. So, all right, let's take a simple 3-chord progression here. I was messing around with this before the live stream came on. We'll play a 1, E major, B minor, so 5 minor, down to 4, A major. So we're in the key of E here, and we're just gonna play a simple 1, 5 minor, 4 progression. And I'm gonna play it in a few different places up the neck and then kind of explain how you can start to do this yourself. This is for the beginner player who wants to break out of just playing the same open voice cowboy chords, right? So first position would be down here. Now I'm gonna move up to my next voicing here. There's E major. Now I'm back to E major here. 5 minor, B minor. 4 chord, A major. Back to 1, E major, and then now I'm back up the octave. I'm here on the 12th fret, right? So we have really, really simple triads. Now, a way you can start to do this, start to learn this, is take the chord, the simple E major shape that we all learn when we're beginners. You don't have to play the whole chord, right? Start with just playing the whole progression, but only focusing on the bottom 3 strings. So your E major would be like this, right? And then your B minor would be here. And your A major is here. And if you look, you can even, play the whole chord voicing in your left hand, but only play the top 3 strings in the right hand. Same thing here, you can only play. So that's one way to start to break down and visualize how these different chords move around the neck. So from there, we're gonna go up and we're starting to use our cage system here. So here I've got an E major, sorry, that's D major. Here's E major. And I'm playing basically like a C shape, right? It's this chord shape, but I've moved it up so my root note is E, and I know that because I know the notes on my 5th string, right? So here's my root note E, major 3rd, perfect 5th. And then I can apply the same logic here, which is to say, I don't have to play that whole chord. I can voice this E major right here, almost like a D voicing. And this is really helpful if you're getting into like lead guitar, right? If you want to be playing guitar in an ensemble or a band where you are accompanying another guitar player, for example, or a keys player, where they might be playing chord voicings lower down here, and you want to be able to move and play in different parts of the neck, you can voice your chords differently if you know these triads and you know where your root notes are and you know the basic triad shapes. You can basically move around, and one thing to practice is move between the chords with as little motion as possible. It's called voice leading, right? So you can voice lead these chords. So I'll do this up here on the 12th fret. Kind of like a, I don't know, let's get like a U2 kind of sound going. We've got the delay. So let's say I was playing and it was more of an upbeat driving thing. I could play this whole chord progression, E, B minor, A major. I could do it up here like this. Or like this. Even on just those 2 strings, those little dyad chords, those 2-note chords, you're still hearing the progression, even though I'm not playing all 6 strings or 5 strings. I'm just playing 2 or 3 strings. That is pretty quintessential, I think, to intermediate players. Understanding where your chord voicings are, understanding your triads up and down the neck, using your notes, knowing where your notes are on the 6th string and the 5th string, and being able to move and play chord progressions and songs in different positions up and down the neck. Matt in the chat says, great topic. Maybe in the future chat, could you cover how to transition from intermediate to advanced? Yeah, I think that'd be a cool thing to cover.
Yeah, so kind of in that same vein, I think what's confusing about that to some people, like especially beginners, is how the fingerings change.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're using you're using bits and pieces of those cage chords,
right?
But the fingerings are changing,
right?
And I think that makes it look like you're doing a whole different thing.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because I can understand how that's confusing. Because when you're first starting out, right, you see a chord shape, right? Like if you take this G major. And I know when I was first starting out, I saw a chord like that and said, okay, that's G. That's how you play G. In fact, when I took my entrance exam to get into AIM, Knight Driscoll, the dean of the school who did my exam, he said, okay, play me F. I went, all right, cool. He was like, cool, now play in a different position on the neck. I was like, well, what do you mean? This is F. Like, this is the F chord. This is where it lives on the guitar. When you have to play F, this is what you play. And I didn't understand that you could play it in several different positions. So when you see chord shapes change, or guitar players voicing chords in different ways, part of it is like an economy thing. It's like, what's the easiest way for me to voice a specific chord? Okay, so like if we go back to this E major shape here, that's pretty standard, that's pretty stock, right? But if I play it here, you may look at that and say, well, how is that E major? That doesn't look like E major. And I can understand that, but if you actually look at what's going on here, we have a root E, we have a major third, right? It's exactly the same kind of shape as happening here in this C major, but I'm having to change how I'm voicing the chord, because in this position, the open strings, the nut is acting like my first finger barring here. If I just played this open E right here, this E major voicing, listen to what happens. I have that open G string ringing out, and that's a flat 3 again, so you get this like major minor kind of weird voicing, which Chris likes. He's into that kind of stuff. But so what's happening here is this is just an economy thing, right? I'm just changing where I'm placing my fingers so that I can play the chord. Same thing if we go here to this E major here, which is essentially like a D major, but I'm sliding the whole chord up one whole step to E major. And yeah, you could play it just like that, where you do first finger, third finger, second finger. But I actually don't. I usually play it like this, where I'm barring my first finger and using my second finger.
And that's kind of like taking it from the caged chord, right?
Yeah.
Like you would be barring it anyways if you're playing it like that.
Right. And that's because I'm changing my approach based off of where I am on the fretboard. That's really it. And everyone's hands are shaped differently. Everyone kind of approaches how they play the chords differently. That's one thing I used to tell my students all the time. It's like, don't look at exactly what I'm doing and try and make that work for you, because I'm coming at this with, years of working at my own habits and doing what's comfortable and voicing chords in certain ways. Part of it's because just like the anatomy of my hand, how my hand works and where my fingers fall on the frets naturally. So, if you're a complete beginner and you're having trouble with chords like buzzing, right? Notes not coming out and buzzing, sit there and figure out, like, adjust your hand, get to where it's comfortable, and get to the position where you're not having to press down super hard on the frets to get the note to ring out. Ideally, you shouldn't be pressing down all that hard to get a note to ring. And just find the spot that's comfortable for you. Yeah. Let's see here.
We get some good questions.
Yeah.
So Chris R with a donation, thanks. How long is it reasonable for something to take to see in your playing? Like, you know, if you start working on something, how long does it take before it comes out in your playing?
Usually? I mean, it totally differs depending on the player. And this is the other thing to talk about. Like, intermediate players that have transitioned from beginners to intermediates, I think have found a practice regimen and a practice routine that works for them. In fact, Chris and I were talking about this earlier today. I do not do well with like a structured, regimented practice routine. I never have. It's not interesting to me. It's boring, and it takes the joy and it takes the fun out of guitar for me. Like, I never want to sit and just practice, you know, like running scales, running chord shapes, because I don't play that way. I don't play music that way. So for me, it doesn't make sense to practice that way. Now, the trade-off is I'm not a great technician. I don't have a great technical ability because I haven't spent a lot of my time practicing the techniques that are required to become a fast and super precise player. Part of that's just because I'm not interested in that sound. That's not the sound that excites me when I listen to music, so that's not the sound that I gravitated towards. But Chris does enjoy that style of practice.
Yeah, I do. I think I'm somewhere sort of in the middle. I don't have like a super regimented practice like schedule like some people do, but I try to write down what I do. Oh, the battery on my camera just died.
Well, there goes Chris Cam.
Chris Cam is gone. Now I'm just
now the disembodied voice of
Chris. But yeah, I tend to write down like goals that I want to practice.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about this. Like, I've been learning some new Brazilian music.
Right.
And I've been sitting there with this one song for like 5 days.
Yeah.
And just shedding on that one song for like hours a day.
Yeah, and so that's the thing with intermediate players is you've started to kind of find your thing, what works for you. For me, it was learning songs and trying to transcribe solos, like transcribing Pink Floyd solos and learning James Taylor songs. And actually a big one for me was, you know, I started playing guitar in 2003, and that's when the Dave Matthews Band Live at Central Park record came out. And on that record was Warren Haynes. And Warren Haynes came up and played with them for a few songs, like Cortez the Killer, for example. And that's essentially the song that kind of taught me about the E minor pentatonic scale and how to solo and improvise in E minor pentatonic. And it came from listening. And for me, it was, I like the way this sounds. Every time I listen to this song, I get really excited. I want to be able to do that, so I'm going to learn that thing. And none of it was ever, part of it was because I didn't know. I didn't have a guitar teacher to show me this stuff. But, you know, I never sat and practiced, you know, sequences and certain licks and things like that in E minor pentatonic. I was just trying to learn what Warren Haynes played. I was trying to learn his licks. Same thing with, you know, my friend across the street, Mike Gilmartin, showed me Stevie Ray Vaughan when I was 13 or 14, and learning that kind of stuff, learning AC/DC, learning Pink Floyd. So that's what worked for me. But it's totally dependent on who you are and what type of player you are and how you work, right? If you're the type of person that likes to sit down with a scheduled practice routine and you can do it every day and you enjoy that discipline, then that's what you should do. And to go back to the question, that the more time you spend, the faster you're going to get something. I mean, that's just how it works. So if sitting down with a regimented practice routine is what's going to allow you to spend more time on your instrument, you're going to grow. If sitting down and learning songs and transcribing solos is what's going to inspire you to pick up your guitar and spend more time on your instrument, then that's what you do. If writing songs and producing tracks in Ableton or Logic or whatever, if that's what inspires you to pick up your guitar, then that's what you do. There is no like right or wrong way to practice or to learn something. I saw someone in here earlier said caged is useless, and that could not be further from the truth, because while the cage system might not work for you, it's worked for a lot of people, myself included, to kind of be the springboard that helped me understand the fretboard that I then used to go deeper. Understanding where these triads are, understanding these triad shapes, where the intervals are, and being able to play in different positions on the neck, is what I use to then take the next step in understanding harmony and understanding the fretboard. So to say something is useless is completely wrong. It may not work for you and how you learn stuff, but it's worked for a lot of other people. So, yeah.
Do you want to get into some more specific stuff?
Yeah, I think the next thing to talk about is pentatonics. So
I've been getting some questions like about some really specific things.
Okay.
I've been seeing so many questions. Everyone is really interested in sus chords. And
Cool.
especially that thing you do, you know, when you have like the second inversion triad, like from an A shape, and you hammer it on with the 4 chord. Yeah, people want to know how to do that.
Okay. All right. So this is like, I think of it as like the Keith Richards thing.
Do you see how we just communicated there?
Look at that.
We used the cage system and
We used the
number
cage system and
and
numbers
inversions
and inversions.
all at once.
Theory.
That's what theory is good for. It's not good for like actually playing necessarily.
Right.
But just what we did
No,
there.
you're serious. You're right though. You're completely right. Here. So if you are intimidated, like I was for a long time, I was intimidated by music theory because I thought that to be a great musician, you have to know a ton of theory. And that's just wrong. Theory, like we said a minute ago, it's just a way to communicate ideas in like a standardized form. That's all it is. Theory doesn't create, well, I guess I shouldn't say that because some people use theory to create ideas and everything. But
It's a spectrum.
for me, it's just a way to communicate my ideas. All right. So,
But you knew exactly what I meant when I
Right.
said that.
Right.
And I didn't have to play anything. I didn't have to pick up a guitar. You knew exactly what I meant.
right. Okay. So what we're talking about here is this thing. So I think of it as like the Keith Richards thing, right? Like kind of the So essentially what's happening here, if we look at it from the A position, an A major triad, I'm taking it up and I'm suspending. So we should talk about sus chords, another intermediate thing to understand. Suspended chords is where you are taking the third note of the chord, in this case the major third, it's C sharp in A, and we're either raising it, right, up 1/2 step to the 4th, which is D in this case. So now when I play this chord, there is no third. I no longer have the C sharp in the chord. I've replaced it with the D, the 4th note of the scale. And if you're not familiar with these numbers, where I'm getting them from, it comes from the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? So we're getting these triads, these major triads, by taking the root, the 1st note, the 3rd note, and the 5th note of that major scale for that chord and playing them together, and that gives you a major triad, no matter what key you happen to be in, okay? Now to play a sus chord, I'm gonna take that 3rd note, in this case C sharp, and I'm gonna raise it up 1/2 step to get a sus 4, a suspended 4th chord, and that's gonna give me that kind of sound, right? I can also do the other thing by dropping the 3rd down a whole tone or a whole step down to the 2, which would give me this sound. So again, I have no 3rd in here. I just have the open B string. There's my triad, regular A major, A sus 4. You know, the other way to think about this would be on D. Right? So you have D major triad, D sus 4, where I've taken the F sharp, which is the 1, 2, 3 of D, and I've raised it up 1/2 step to G, to my sus 4. Same thing here. My sus 2 is the open E. Right? And you wouldn't call this a 9 chord. You wouldn't call this D major 9 because there's no 3rd. Right? The other way you can play it, let's play our D major here in this 5th string major triad position, right? So I have root, 5th, root, a power chord, and then my major 3rd right here, in this case the F sharp, right there. So I can go sus 4, right there, triad, sus 2. And if you want to get really spicy, take this octave here and drop it down to the major 7. That's an expensive chord right there. Pricey. This is the chord that like you play to let people know, like.
Yeah, you got to do it finger style too.
Yeah, like these kind of. And then somebody asks, "Hey, what chord is that?" Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's you don't need to know about the chord.
You don't need to know about that.
So that's sus.
Okay, so yeah, so back to the keef thing. So you can kind of look at it as a couple of different things. You can make it like a sus4, right? With that F sharp, so adding the 6 on there. It's also kind of like taking this shape here, the D major triad over A. Right, and so that's it's kind of a classic sound. You can do it anywhere there's a triad shape like that. The 5th string root, like the A shape from the cage system, you can do it on E here. It's a cool way to kind of outline. You can play, if you're playing like those major 6 voicings up the neck.
Yeah, I like to think of it as the 4,
Right.
really, instead of a sus chord, because it's sort of that churchy thing too. You can kind of do it like a churchy,
right? Yeah, so and that's the other thing to think about this is there's different ways to think about. Let's go back to ACAM here.
Oh, sorry.
There's different ways to call these chords, to think about these chords. So we got a top chat here. Hey, Rhett, could you explain arpeggios and how to use them? Loving the stream. Yes. Also, if you're just joining us, we have a few sales going on. We have probably less than 10 coupons available at this point for 50% off of any of my video courses. There's only 10 available at this point, probably less than 10. You can find those linked in the chat. And if you're watching this later, or if we're out of those 10 coupons, we can you have 35% off of the Fretboard Fundamentals course, which is a video course that's taking a lot of the subjects that we're talking about here and going into much deeper detail. We're also working on a new video course right now, a rhythm guitar course that's going to take a lot of these subjects and do a really deep dive. Also, new t-shirts, Fuzz Evangelist t-shirts, designed by our very own assistant Chris.
Assistant producer, jazz school extraordinaire.
He had a camera and then it died, so now he's the disembodied.
Yeah. Also, thanks, Jeremy, for the top chat earlier. Spare battery for the Chris cam.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Appreciate it.
We just need to plug it up.
I guess we could.
We could. But you're kind of like...
I'm good. It's fine.
You're backed in there. All right. So, arpeggios. The way I think about arpeggios, and when I was learning them in music school, is breaking it down in a really simple form. You take a chord, right? Like an E minor, right? And if we take this E minor triad, arpeggios would just be breaking down the elements that build that chord. So we have a root, a 5th, a root, and a minor 3rd, and that's what makes this E minor voicing, right? So you could arpeggiate this a few different ways. You could play it basically with just this chord shape and play, root, 5th, root, minor 3rd, root, 5th, root, or you could do... And they're really useful for a few different things. They're outlining chords in solos or writing melodies. So on Noah's new record, Blue Wall, we have a song. It's called Feel It Now. And I have a line that I play at the beginning of the song. So the chords are B minor over A down to G. And I play this. And so I'm pulling that melody out of this B minor triad and thinking of it almost like an arpeggio. So, Dustin asks, how come we plug things up, not in? I'm not sure. Thanks, James, for the top chat there. Let's see here. A lot of these chords remind me of Drop Dead Legs, Van Halen, says Chris.
We got some questions earlier about how you should approach getting better at playing with a drummer or just getting better at your rhythm.
Okay.
That's
another really important part for not just going from beginner to intermediate, but becoming a more advanced player, being able to play with drums. So I kind of think there's two elements to this. The first element is just being able to keep time, right? So you have a metronome going, you have a click track going, and whatever you're doing, whether it's running a scale or playing a rhythm, right? Like a funk thing, like a whatever you're doing, you're able to keep time. If you want to play, if you want to gig, or you want to play professionally, or you want to do session work or record yourself, this is crucial. You have to be able to play in time and keep tempo, right? Where you're not speeding up ahead of the click track or falling behind it. So some really good ways to practice that is get a metronome app on your phone, or if you have a DAW at home that you're recording into, set up a click track at a medium tempo, something like 85 or 90 BPM, and start, which is picking one note, okay? And start with all downstrokes. If you 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, it's really boring. What you're trying to do is line up your notes exactly on the click, right? Then start alternate picking. This is also a really good alternate picking right hand exercise. Alternate pick eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? And then after that, start to do things like run scale positions or run exercises. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and whatever it is you're happening to do. Then,
could you explain that real quick, what you just did there?
This little exercise?
Yeah.
Okay, so essentially this is like a right hand and left hand synchronizing synergy exercise, if you will. So essentially what I'm doing is basically I'm going to number my fingers 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want to play 1, 3, 2, 4, and I'm alternate picking in the right hand. So down, up, and then I'm switching up to the next string. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And then when I get here to the top string, I'm going to move up 1/2 step and go down. So this is the tricky part.
So you're just doing it backwards there?
Right, and then now I'm going up. And you don't have to go super fast. I can't go super fast. I have friends that do this like just crazy up, and I can't.
So it's just to like lock in your left and right hand?
Yeah, lock in the left and right hand. It's also a good kind of finger dexterity thing in the left hand, kind of wake it up. So yeah, being able to play in time is the first step to this. And this is something that you should practice. Turn on your metronome and practice with your metronome. Practice playing in time. Whether you're playing, a chord progression, playing this in time with a metronome.
Did you turn your volume down on the guitar?
Yeah, I did.
I was like, what?
Everything you're doing when you're practicing, especially as a beginner, you should be doing with a metronome. Then playing with a drummer. Now, this is different because drummers are human, right? Which means a drummer is going to naturally ebb and flow with their tempo. And this varies with different drummers. I've played with some drummers that are like human click tracks. They are so tight. Chad Collins from DEACON KNIGHT is like this. Chad has some of the best time of any musician I've ever heard. And he can choose pretty easily whether he wants to be deadlocked onto a tempo and hold that tempo steady. He can choose if he wants to kind of slightly push and be a little bit ahead, or he can drag and pull behind, or over the course of a song, he can do both. He can push on a chorus and bring the tempo of the chorus up just a little bit, and then for a verse or a bridge, he can bring it back and kind of sit back in the beat a little bit. And as a guitar player, you are part of the rhythm section. When you're playing in a band with a drummer and a bass player, you are part of the rhythm section. And so it's your job when you're on stage with other musicians to not only be playing your parts, but to be listening to what they're doing specifically the drummer and the bass player, and be locked in, playing in the pocket, as it's called. And that's a more sort of nebulous thing. Really, the only way to learn that is to do it, is to start playing with people, start playing with drummers in the room. And it might be pretty difficult at first. If you haven't spent a lot of time playing with other people, it's a little jarring in the beginning, to sit with a group of people and learn how to sit in with them. And that's the other thing, is different groups of people play together differently, right? So different groups of musicians have different strengths and weaknesses, and when they come together, it creates a different musical sort of experience. So yeah, the first thing is, when it comes to playing in time, playing with a drummer, is being able to actually keep time, to play to a click track consistently.
I think that's a misconception too, because like a lot of people, when they're playing in a band, they're like, oh, the drummer keeps time. Everybody in the band is keeping time.
Everyone's keeping
themselves.
time, and you need to be listening to everyone.
Oh yeah.
That's a lesson that took me a long time to figure out. A long time, probably too long to figure out. You need to be listening intently to everything, not just the parts that people are playing, but are we picking up the tempo a little bit in the chorus? Are we pushing a little bit? Are we dragging? Maybe you want to create some tension. So maybe you want to, the drummer and the bass player, they're on beat. Maybe you're pushing against their time, or you're pulling against their time. If it's an intentional thing, it can be incredibly powerful. But if it's not intentional, because you haven't spent time practicing your time, so to speak, then it can become a bit of a mess. And I've been in those situations too. And I can tell you that when you're in a musical scenario with someone that doesn't have great time feel, you cannot connect musically, because you are spending the whole time focusing on trying to get locked in with them, and then they're all over the place, and it just you can't. The band can't lock together. You can't play in the pocket. So no matter what your instrument is, if you want to play with people, and you want to play live with people, or you want to play in the studio with people, you need to have great time feel.
I think most of the time, if you're in a band scenario and something seems off, like something's not gelling, something's not going well, I think 90% of the time it's something to do with time feel.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, playing with someone who doesn't have great time, it would be like us having a conversation and I was constantly talking like right as you start talking.
Yeah. It's tough. And so I think developing time feel, developing a sense of rhythm is easier for some people than it is for others, but working with a metronome. Ronald in the chat says, besides a metronome, would a looper pedal be an effective way to keep in time with a guitar solo? The thing about the looper pedal, depending on what type of pedal you have, it's kind of up to your own sense of time feel to get the loop set right, to start and stop the loop on time.
That could be really hard.
Which can be really hard. Let's see. If you
try to use a looper live on stage with people, you'll pick up that skill.
Right.
If you try to use it, incorporate with your band.
Which is admittedly something I don't do a lot of. What I would say is, if you're wanting to you've been working with a metronome and you want to kind of get a little bit more practice with what playing with a drum would be like, download some drum loops. Right, go on Splice or go buy a pack from someone, or even just pull up a drum loop, like a breakbeat loop or whatever, on YouTube, and use that as your metronome. If it's a loop, it's going to be in a certain time, in a certain tempo, and it's going to be locked to that tempo. And so you can use that drum loop as your metronome, but there's other things happening there, right? It's not just, a certain click. There's different rhythmic elements that are happening that you need to be able to pay attention to. So what's the hi-hat doing? What's the kick drum doing, and what's the snare drum doing? Just those three elements, right? Whether it's, the right hand, the left hand, and the right foot of the drummer. If it's a ride, if it's a hat, if it's a crash ride, what's the snare drum doing? What's his left hand doing? Is it just straight rim shots on the backbeat, 2 and 4? Are there ghost notes happening between the backbeat? Is he offsetting and hitting like the and of 4? So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and, right? And then what's the kick pattern doing? Bass players primarily are known for listening mostly to the kick drum, locking with the kick drum. So that's a really good place to start as a guitar player when you're learning to listen to the rhythm section. Pay attention to what the kick pattern is doing alongside what the bass guitar is doing, and then take what you're doing, take your part, and make it fit in with that. Make the rhythm of what you're playing fit in with that. Or maybe the hi-hat's doing something cool, and you want to do something that locks with the hi-hat or the snare drum. As you start to do this stuff, you start to transition from just practicing with a metronome to being able to play with a drummer. And then the final part of that is actually getting in the room with a real drummer and being able to do all that while listening to their time feel and the natural ebb and flow of the whole band and staying locked in. And when you do that, it's like the greatest feeling in the world, man. When the band, when an ensemble is locked into the pocket and everyone is just feeling it, it's amazing. It's my favorite thing. It's why I love playing live. It's why I love playing with people, whether it's in a studio or it's on a gig or whatever. When you lock into the pocket, my God, it's one of the coolest things you can experience. We have one coupon left for the 50% off any course. So someone jump on that. And then after that's gone, you can get 35% off Fretboard Fundamentals with the discount code either in the description or in the chat.
And t-shirts.
I never have merch, so I always forget. We have a brand new line of merch, the Fuzz Evangelist line. I think this is only going to be available for a limited time. I don't think we're going to run this forever.
I mean, it's kind of up to you.
Yeah, I guess so. Designed by our very own producer Chris.
Also, we have some questions about playing to a click. So like we talked about playing live and getting in the pocket. What about if you're in a studio with a click, or what about if you're on a live stage with a click in the ear?
Well, yes, this is what I was saying earlier, that if you want to do this on any professional or semi-professional level, where you're performing in front of people or you're recording in the studio, being able to play to a click is absolutely necessary. And it's difficult, especially in the studio. There's this thing that happens in the studio called red light syndrome. It happens to everybody, especially when you're first starting out, which is the idea of you can play a part, but as soon as that red light comes on, you know it in your brain, oh, I'm being recorded right now. I'm going to tape, so to speak. And it gets in your head and you lose all sense of your part, all sense of your time. But one way to get past that is being able to play with a click track. Now, I've played with clicks live a lot. I used to play mega church gigs at, North Point and all these massive American mega churches, which is basically like playing an arena rock show every week. And there, it's not just a click track. It's a guide track. It's the producer in your ears. It's the music director in your ears. It's like just a cacophony of noise and distraction. And so what I would typically do is keep the click relatively low in my mix and keep the drums and the bass really hot, because as I said earlier, drummers and bass players are human. And so even if they're playing to a click, there's still going to be some slight deviation in their tempo. And I want to be locked with them, not the click, because the audience isn't hearing the click track. They're hearing us. So if a drummer is speeding and pushing the click, I want to follow the drummer. If the drummer is dragging behind the click, I want to follow the drummer. So yeah, that was my way of getting around that. I hate playing with a click live, though. God, I hate it.
I've never done it before.
It's necessary for some gigs, for some situations. If you're in a highly produced situation where there's lights and there's visuals and you're playing with backing tracks and all that stuff, you have to have a click track. It's just not my favorite thing in the world.
Oh my gosh, Jacob Sandez says, "What if your drummer sucks?"
Well, unfortunately, none of us can help that. You can only worry about yourself and having your own stuff together.
That's an interesting comment. XX Interstate, he says, "I've been playing for 9 years. I'm like a shred fusion guitarist. I can play fast and precise and with feel, but I get really confused with simple things like syncopation, counterrhythm, and polyrhythms."
Well, I'm not the guy to talk about polyrhythms.
But syncopation.
So do some more listening. Like, change up what you're listening to. Go put on some meter stuff. Go put on some Paul Jackson Jr., like records that Paul Jackson Jr. played on. Like, listen to a lot of the great funk and gospel guitarists.
Mm-hmm. Find something you like that's the opposite of shred.
Yeah. Shred stuff is cool. And you can absolutely play fast with feel. There are plenty of guitar players that do that really, really well. But yeah, when it comes to stepping outside your comfort zone, change up what you're listening to, first of all. And for that, my personal recommendations are, go listen to some of the great, like, early funk stuff, those early, like, James Brown records. And again, don't just listen to the guitar players and what the guitar players are doing. What are the horn players doing? What's the drummer doing? What's the bass player doing? And how are they using those different rhythmic elements to create the groove? It's really fascinating. If you think about, James Brown, the key to James Brown music, I saw Questlove talk about this in an interview one time. It's like, it's all about the one. You can do whatever you want in the bar as long as you get back to the one and you smack the shit out of the one, right? And if you listen to James Brown stuff, it's true. Like, every time the one comes around, everyone in the band lands on the 2, 3, 2, 3. Tomo Fujita is someone you should go check out and watch when it comes to learning syncopation and rhythm and
Steve
pocket.
Cropper.
Steve Cropper, yeah.
Steve Cropper.
There's so many great players out there that you could listen to. Paul Jackson Jr., like the Luther Vandross records that Paul Jackson Jr. played on, the Wolfpack stuff. There's Mark Lettieri. God, that guy's a master.
Blake Mills.
Blake Mills.
Yep.
Dude, there are some incredible players out there that do that stuff really well. Nile Rodgers, Melody in the chat says, Nile Rodgers, hell yes, absolutely Nile Rodgers. So yeah.
We had someone earlier say, I thought this was interesting, how to listen to yourself critically so you can decide what to practice.
Okay, so this is another part, getting back to our, what makes an intermediate player. Record yourself practicing. Even if it's a simple chord progression, right? If we go back to our, So if you're doing a simple chord progression like that, grab your phone, turn on the voice memo app. Most smartphones today have some kind of way to record yourself. Set the phone on the desk in front of you and record yourself playing for a few seconds, a few minutes, whatever it is. Then put your guitar down and listen to what you just recorded. And I guarantee you're not going to sound like you think you sound. It can be kind of a jarring thing at first, because when you have the guitar in your hand and you're playing, you're listening to what you're doing, but you are also splitting your focus between hearing what you're doing and actually doing it. When the guitar is out of your hand and you go and listen to what you just played, you can't hide behind the recording, right? It's showing you every single little wart and thing in your playing. And it can be a little jarring at first, but it's incredibly useful because it will show you exactly what you need to change, what you need to work on. I used to do this a lot, where if I was working on something or learning a part for an artist that I was playing with, learning a part off their record, I would play the part and I would learn it, transcribe it, and then I would turn off the reference track and I would sit and record just the part, the way I thought it sounded. I'd record my version of it, and then I'd listen to my version, and then I'd listen to the record version. And this did a couple things for me. One, it showed me what I needed to change about my feel. Maybe it was played in a different part of the neck. Maybe I needed to, change dynamically what I was doing. It also helped for tone, for dialing in my sound to get close to what was on the record. When I was doing a lot of the hired gun stuff, that was super, super important. Also, if you want to get to the point where you are playing on recordings, whether you're recording yourself or you're getting hired for sessions, this is a great way to get over that red light syndrome thing I was talking about earlier, where you practice recording yourself. You don't need a fancy studio setup with microphones and interfaces and all that stuff to get the practice of recording in. Set your phone up and practice recording a part, and treat it like you were on a session. Make up a session in your mind where there's a solo that you transcribed, or a chord progression, or a part that you want to play, and hit record on your phone and play the whole thing down. Set the guitar down almost like you're walking back into the control room to listen to what you just tracked and listen to it. And be honest with yourself. Like, okay, this was really good. I liked the way I sounded here, but this bend was a little flat. This vibrato could have felt better. Or maybe I shouldn't play that on the neck pickup. Maybe I should switch the bridge or whatever. There's so many different things you can find out about just listening to yourself recording. So Pete in the top chat, love the dipped in tone idea about opening the new studio with a Noah performance. Yeah, appreciate that, man. Hoping to have the new studio done this summer, but we will see.
What are your thoughts on intonation issues due to pressing the strings too hard?
Oh, yeah.
Good question in the chat.
Yeah. So this is a thing that I see a lot with beginners and that I struggled with a lot. So we go back to our E chord here, right? You can't see this on the video, but I am barely touching the fretboard. I have as little pressure pressing down on the strings as I can to get the notes to ring out well. And if your guitar is set up well, like this one is, you really don't need that much force at all to press the chords down. So now what I'm gonna do is play the same chord, but I'm gonna really apply a lot of pressure to the fretboard and listen to what happens. I'm completely pulling the guitar out of tune, right? In fact, I kind of pulled that G sharp way too hard. So
The dangers of new strings.
yeah, these are brand new strings. Don't judge me. So playing way too hard. For beginners especially, it's tough because you're spending a lot of time like trying just to get notes out without buzzing, right? You're trying to get your notes to sound clear. And your brain tells you, oh, it's not working. I need to press harder, okay? And maybe that might be true at first. You know, for some of my students back when I was teaching lessons, there were some people that just needed to press down harder on the strings. But more than likely, you'd need to reposition your finger to get up on the tip of your finger when you're fretting a note or playing a chord. Like get up on the very, very tips of your fingers, not on the pad. That's one thing. If you have this problem where you push too hard, take a second and practice something that you're really familiar with. Go to like your comfort zone. Go to the same licks that you play over and over again and practice them slowly and playing as light as possible, right? So I might play something like just that little section there. So right there, I'm trying to play as lightly as I possibly can. And I'm taking it really slow, and I'm concentrating on not bending the notes out of tune, only when I want to. Like there. So all that stuff, I'm trying to just keep my touch as light as possible. It just takes practice. It takes like dedicated practice to concentrating on lightening your touch, and eventually you will slowly start to come out of that habit. I don't think it's something that just gets fixed overnight, though.
I think what was hard for me when I was trying to do that, because I kind of deal with tendonitis and stuff if I play too hard, but the difference between playing lightly and playing soft, like dynamically soft, I don't know why, but always for me, when I first started trying to play lightly, my right hand would want to go soft too. So like being able to dig in with your right hand and not dig in with your left hand.
Yeah, I find that tricky.
Super difficult.
It's tricky. It's like the hand independence thing.
That's something I still practice.
Right.
Yeah, it's a whole can of worms.
We got a top chat, but it scrolled past. I don't have my...
Love the dipped in tone idea about opening the new studio with a no performance.
Yeah. And then there was another one. That one.
Oh, Joel Morris. Totally off topic, but do you think there needs to be more female guitarists within the music industry?
I mean, I don't think there needs to be any more or less of any type of person in the guitar world. I think there are more female guitarists coming into it now, which is amazing. And they're coming into, I think for a long time, guitar kind of has been a boys' club. And thankfully that's changing. But I don't say or think there needs to be, any one type of person or more of one type of person to come into guitar. I just think guitar is growing in popularity. 2020 and 2021 were the two biggest years for new guitar sales in the history of guitar. More people are picking up guitars now than seemingly ever because of the pandemic, which is amazing. And what I think is going to happen over the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years, the young people that are picking up guitars today are going to become the next generation of artists 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as they grow up and grow into their early 20s. And we're going to see a lot more guitar coming back in pop culture, in pop music. We're going to see it make a comeback. It's not going to look like it has. We're not going to see the rise of like classic rock again.
Metallica 2.
Yeah, Metallica 2. Led Zeppelin redo. Although that kind of already is happening. But yeah, I think there's gonna be a lot more guitars being played in popular music again, and I'm here for it, man. It's not gonna look or sound like what it has in the past, and that's totally cool. I don't think it should. That stuff has all been done, and we love it. But yeah.
Got any thoughts about muting?
Oh yeah. Hold on, we got one more top chat here, and we'll talk about muting.
Cool.
Austin, thanks for top chat, man. I've learned so much about recording and the general guitar knowledge from this channel. Will always support when I can. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. All right, muting. So this is another thing, getting back to the intermediate guitarist thing, muting. Now, this is something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot when... oh, yes, I'm being told to plug everything. Don't forget, we have one more coupon for 50% off of any of my video courses. Actually, that might have already gone, but yeah, one more I think is available. And we're currently running 35% off of the Fretboard Fundamentals course. If you want to know more about a lot of the topics that we're covering in this live stream, you can get that course for 35% off. And go get a Fuzz Evangelist t-shirt here.
They're all gone now.
Oh, okay. Well, all the 50% are gone. So you can get 35% off of the tone course, the Fretboard Fundamentals course, or go get yourself a t-shirt or a sweater or both. Hell, don't let me tell you what to do. Maybe you want one of everything. I don't know. What were we talking about? Muting. Okay.
That's one of the biggest tells for me with when I really transition from a beginner to something more intermediate or something more advanced.
Right. So when we say muting, there's a couple of different things that we're talking about. Okay. First off is the muting in your picking hand, right? The palm muting thing. This is usually the first thing that we all learn, right? Resting your palm on the bridge of the guitar and just using that to mute. It's super cool. It's super easy. But that's not necessarily what I'm talking about here. Muting is, as Chris was saying, a big telltale sign from someone who's just starting out on guitar to someone who's been playing for a while and knows what they want to sound like or knows what they should sound like. And that is the idea of, let's take this D major, for example, right? Ideally, I just want to play, but let's say I'm strumming this chord. How do I play that chord without hearing all of these, the low A and low E? Well, this is a couple things to practice. First of all, I like to play this chord with wrapping my thumb over the top of the neck right here for a few reasons. One is to kind of mute. I can use the meat of my thumb to grab those low two strings and just mute them out. Two, if I wanted to play like a D over F sharp, I've got the thumb right there to play that 1/3 chord. But the other part of this, when it comes to playing chords, is in the right hand, okay? So I used to take lessons from a really good friend of mine named Benjamin Forehand. Ben is one of the best guitar players I know. He's awesome. If you don't know him, you should go follow him. I think he's at the Benjamin Forehand on Instagram. He's all into duck hunting now, so if you go to his Instagram, you're going to see just a bunch of duck calls and stuff. But he's a monster guitar player, and he taught me one time in a lesson, in the right hand, being able to isolate the two different string sets. So if you take these 6 strings and you isolate them, and you have the bottom 3 strings and the top 3 strings, or so the wound strings and the unwound strings. One thing that you can practice is isolating in a strumming pattern, only picking the top 3 strings or the bottom 3 strings. So you can sit here and, so right there, I'm only playing the top 3 strings. And now I'm going to shift my right hand and target the bottom 3 strings. So
Can you turn to the side and like show that show the angle of your wrist?
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
This side or this side? This side's probably
side's better, yeah.
All right. So actually, you want to dial that focus in because it's focusing on my left hand. So like I was saying, bottom 3, top 3, or top 3, bottom 3, depending on how you look at it. So when it comes to playing a chord like this D major, I can now target just these top 3 or 4 strings, even though I'm giving a full strum. The other part of this is in the left hand, okay? So those chords that I just played, D major, we already discussed muting the bottom 2 strings. A major, when I'm playing with a sound like this, where there's quite a bit of distortion coming from my amplifier, I'm primarily just barring here, and I'm really only playing an A power chord. I'm not really targeting the C sharp, that major third. I'm really just playing this. But then when I went to this C chord here, that C add 9, if you look, what I'm actually playing is just, I'm muting the 3rd string and the 1st string with my middle finger and my ring finger. The way I'm doing that is playing the C right here on the 5th string, and I'm letting the fat part of my finger, the pad of my finger, just rest on this D string right here. So I have, then I have the open G, and then I'm doing the same thing on the 1st string. I'm playing D right here with my ring finger, and then I'm muting the 1st string here. Now, that's what this sounds like muted. So listen to what happens if I don't mute. There's a lot more happening there. So going from a beginner to an intermediate, that's one thing. When you're playing chords, muting the strings and muting the notes that you don't want ringing out in the chord, doing it with your left hand. The other thing is being able to play single note lines while really digging in with your right hand without having other strings ring out. So like this kind of thing. Like all that kind of stuff. I'm essentially keeping this sort of chucka funk right hand thing, and I'm using my left hand to mute every single string, every single note that's not the note that I want to hear, right? So a good technique to learn this, some good songs would be like any of the Frusciante Red Hot Chili Peppers stuff. So essentially what I'm doing is moving between my 1st finger, my 3rd finger, and my thumb. So I'm playing the root note A here with my thumb, and then the octave A with my 3rd finger. But everything I have here is muting every other string. In fact,
like that chord.
Yeah, Chris likes this chord. Jazz School Chris, coming.
The overtones, man.
Yeah, the overtones. There you go. So what's essentially happening here is right now I'm not fretting any notes, And then when I want to hear an A, I just press down with my third finger. So that's something that takes a bit of practice, and a good way to do that is to learn songs that require you to mute that way.
Yeah, a top chat from Thomas Croth. He says John Mayer songs are great for learning to practice how to mute on triads.
True.
Somebody says check out Madison Cunningham. I
agree.
Madison
Cunningham. Oh my God,
master of both rhythm and muting.
She's a monster guitar player.
Yeah. Also Jimi Hendrix stuff. If you want to do muting.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's I picked up guitar because of Hendrix, and that was something I worked on early on because I was trying to learn Hendrix songs.
Yeah.
Like
you were playing Wind Cries Mary earlier. That has some good...
Right, the whole... my favorite Hendrix song, and the solo is so good. And then he goes, see. Oh God, I haven't played that in so long.
Yeah, so you were doing all those things there. You were doing a lot of selective picking, like targeting where you were hitting, and doing a lot of muting, like all that stuff.
I was selective picking and selective picking. I was doing both, which is that's something that technique we will cover in the advanced when we do the advanced one. Actually, that might be like the beyond advanced.
Let's just gatekeep that technique.
Yeah, that you guys aren't ready for the picking technique.
The picking. Dude, that's a t-shirt.
The picking.
Like a horror movie t-shirt, the picking.
Oh man, Mike, the world needs more Dave Honorato. Any chance of him coming, doing more videos? Yeah, in fact, I was gonna do a video with him this week, but our schedules didn't align. I have a friend, a special guest, coming in later this week. So, yeah, but we're gonna get together with Dave. I've got some things to do. I want him to help me upgrade the casino. I want to do a video about like a proper video teaching people how to set up their guitars. And he needs to fix something on my acoustic. So yeah, Dave will be around.
I had a good question earlier from Steel Samurai. He says, "What's the best way to fix sloppy technique? I've been playing for about 7 years, and I've started to notice that my technique is not the cleanest."
Okay, well, I think first start off by identifying what do you mean by sloppy technique? Is it like the synchronization of your right hand, your picking hand, and your fretting hand? Is it your rhythm? Is it playing in time? Is it not being able to mute, or is it not being able to bend notes properly, or to bend notes to pitch consistently? Do you have a sloppy vibrato? There's so many things when it comes to like sloppy playing. I think it would help to start by identifying like what do you think is sloppy about your playing. Then you can go about trying to fix it and hone in on it. And that goes for anything. Like, going back to the idea of recording yourself, right? If you record yourself and you consistently hear one thing that you don't like about your playing, well, there you go. That's something to work on. And, if you don't know how to go about it, maybe find a local guitar teacher and hire them for 2 or 3 lessons, right? You can, hey, I'm working on this one thing. I need help with this one thing. How do I do this, right? Or hire someone. There's plenty of players online now. A lot of YouTubers that do, guitar lessons, like Skype lessons and stuff, that you could hire for 1 or 2 sessions and say, hey, I really want you to help me with X. Can you do that? So, yeah, I mean, but to give a little finer point on it, when it comes to fixing sloppy technique, A is identifying what the issue is and what you want to change. things like practicing with a metronome, things like practicing technique exercises, right? Like that thing that I showed you earlier, the So I used this exercise to fix a habit that I have, well, yeah, still have, which is a lot of times if you see me play, I will tend to take my pick and my thumb and I'll angle it down like this and play like... I used to play like this like nonstop. And it can be cool, but it's one of those things that it's cool if it's a creative choice because it changes how your notes sound when they come off the guitar, right? If I angle my pick down versus picking flat against the string. See, to me, that sounds better. The notes are clearer, they're punchier, there's more articulation, there's more of a transient happening with the note. And so I wanted to be able to break that habit of angling my pick down. That was part of a sloppy part of my playing. So I took this exercise and sat and worked on it. Started really slow with a metronome and just went... up and down the neck, with the emphasis being on my picking hand and keeping my pick flat against the string. So that's one thing. Or even just doing one note and picking it in time, alternate picking. The idea being that every note should sound the same. It should have the same volume, almost as if you have a compressor on, even if you don't. All right. So that was an example of how I fixed something that was sloppy in my playing.
Someone says, this is kind of funny, your pick might wear weird if you play like that.
They did. Yeah, they did for a long time. My picks, I don't have any of them now. But
so if you start seeing your pick looking weird, I mean, maybe you got to fix something.
I would have a problem where the picks would wear weird and they would get grooves in the edges, and then they'd get so bad that they would catch the string, and then the pick would fly out of my hands.
That would happen to me when I was like little, playing guitar all the time.
Yeah.
That's a frustrating feeling.
Oh, yeah, it sucks. What a sick looking guitar. Yep, this is a Vila, Diego Vila, builder out of Spain. Really, really cool guitar. I've had this one on loan for a few years now. I don't think the plan originally was for me to have it for a few years, but the pandemic happened, and then, you know, it's a great guitar. I love playing it, so it's going to stick around until he asks for it back.
Ooh, good one. Mike C says, help. My vibrato is too slow.
Vibrato. So this is another thing. Beginner to intermediate guitar player. Vibrato. So vibrato is one of those things that it's kind of like a sonic fingerprint. It's unique to you. Everyone's vibrato is a little bit different, I think. And you can change your vibrato. You can play it faster, slower, more intense, or less intense. But one thing that is always kind of a telltale sign of a beginner player is what I call the nervous vibrato, which is like the this kind of like, or like a real shaky, kind of out of tune, not smooth, not consistent vibrato sound. So for me, the way I play vibrato, and again, this is one of those things, it's a little bit different for everybody. So what works for me may or may not work for you. Your mileage may vary. But the way I think about it is like if I play on the... like that. There's kind of two things happening here. The first thing is I'm getting a little bit of motion in my wrist. I'm kind of... This is an exaggeration, but I'm sort of twisting my wrist this way. And I'm also pulling the strings up and down with my fingers. I've got all three fingers on the same string here. So I'm using all three fingers to pull leverage on that one string. And I'm trying to almost picture like I'm drawing a really consistent sort of sine wave, right? It's smooth, it's in the same time, the same tempo, and the bends, the pitch bends, are consistent. All right. And then practice doing it with different fingers. So practice it with just your first finger. See here, I'm changing my technique up a little bit, and I'm relying more on my wrist to get the motion rather than just my finger, because there's only one finger on the string. So I'm using more of my whole arm. Same thing with the second finger. Although there, now I'm pulling down a little bit more like I am on my third finger. But you should be aiming for a really consistent, smooth vibrato. And practice it fast, practice it slow. Sometimes you want it to be a little faster and more intense. Like, sometimes you want it slow and a little smoother. Right.
What I tend to notice about like great vibrato sounds to me is they don't always start as soon as the note hits.
Right. Think of how a vocalist puts vibrato on their vocals. Most of the time, they will bring the note forward, and then they will add their vibrato afterwards. Violinists, cellists do the same kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So with a guitar, oftentimes you will want to let the note come out and then bring your vibrato in. Same thing with bends. This is another thing to practice. Bend. And then once you're there on pitch, add your vibrato. Yeah. How do you make your vibrato less aggressive? Michael asks. Well, if you've got a really aggressive... I'm assuming when you say aggressive, you mean like a kind of sound, which can be cool if it's a choice that you're making. You're intentional about wanting it to sound like... lighten up your touch, first of all. Don't dig in so hard on the fretboard. And start small. Overcorrect the other way. Try and make it like as soft and small of vibrato as you can. So... right? Almost like it's not even there. And then split the difference. So go from there to like here. Really slow, really small, and then meet in the middle. And then you can vibrato whole chords.
Sometimes you gotta shake the whole guitar though.
Yeah, and I get comments on this from time to time. And I think Paul Davids did a video about this actually, like the shaking your guitar thing. People are like, well, why do you do that? It doesn't do anything. Yes, it does. Listen.
It does, yeah.
It sounds like a vibrato pedal or almost like a chorus.
Well, because the trick is you're not shaking it. You're actually pushing a little bit on your...
I'm pulling tension on the neck.
With your right arm.
Right. So like I'm bracing the guitar against my body, and I'm pulling almost like I'm trying to break the guitar in the middle, and I'm not pulling that hard. Okay, don't like don't get your guitar at home. You're like, like try and actually break it.
But it just looks like you're shaking it. It doesn't look like you're really doing anything.
Yeah. But listen, like. That's a great sound. That's such a great sound.
And then you did that thing where you pushed on you can push on the front of the guitar.
Yeah, so you can put the palm in, and again, be careful. Like, I don't do this on every guitar. Please don't break your guitars doing this.
Do it on my ukulele.
Like, just as nice, smooth, palm of your hand here, and then push against the neck. Right? Please don't break your guitars. And then come. Well, Rhett said in his live stream I was supposed to pull the neck.
And he will ship you a new guitar now.
No, I will not. If you break your guitar doing that, I will not. Oh, man. All right, cool. Let's see here. That technique always scared you. Well, start slow. And the thing is, different guitars do it in different amounts, okay? So, like, a bolt neck guitar... like my Novos, my pink Novos, they do it really, really well. Like you can just kind of breathe on it and get that really nice sort of pitch bend vibrato thing. This one's actually a little bit more difficult because this has a really thick baseball bat neck on it, so it's a little harder to get that reaction out of it. I have to put more pressure on it. But yeah, people in the comments saying like, "Oh, it doesn't do anything. Why do you shake that?" Or somebody one time was like, you look so stupid doing that. Why? Oh my god.
Well, he's not wrong.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's not wrong, but it does do something.
We got a quick question about just string weight suggestions for different levels of player.
Okay.
What are your tips?
What?
Yeah. What? Why?
Why?
How?
Well, so recently, a couple years ago, I made the switch from 10s down to 9s. Rick Beato did a whole video on that, and I made a follow-up video about it. And the reason we did it was because Dave Friedman actually told Rick that if you go to lighter gauge strings and you're playing with heavy distortion, it tightens up the low end of your amp. Which traditionally, if you're playing with a lot of gain, people would use pedals like a tube screamer, which a tube screamer is great for this. You put a tube screamer in front of a really heavy overdriven amp to tighten up the low end. Lighter gauge strings can have a similar effect, and we found through science that that is the case. Lighter gauge strings do have a tighter low end, and I think sound better when you're playing with heavy gain. The idea that like, oh, heavy gauge strings have more tone, I don't think that's true at all. There's so many great players. Jimmy Page played 8s. Billy Gibbons plays 8s. Like, there's a lot of great players that have amazing, huge tone that play 8s. Now, I can't play 8s. They're a little too light for me. Rick plays 8s. I switched to 9s because I liked what it did. It tightened up the low end of the guitar. It made things a little bit more punchy, and it's just more comfortable for me to play. Now, some guitars, like my Novo here, my Ceres J, this still has 10s on it because this tremolo system in this bridge does not like 9s. I tried 9s, and it would not stay in tune. So this, and I believe Mastery recommends that you run 10s, 10 to 46s or 11s. So this guitar still has 10s on it. And this Vila still has 10s on it, but that's because I'm out of guitar strings, and I had to restring this today, so I put 10s on it. But everything else is running 9s. Like my Les Paul running 9s feels amazing. My Strat running 9s feels amazing.
There's also like half gauges too.
You can mix and match gauges. You can do custom gauge sets. Stringjoy is great for that.
Really, whatever feels comfortable, but honestly, most of the time you can go lighter than you think you can.
You can, and the thing is, when you go with a lighter gauge string, you really have to be conscious about your string pressure, your pressure on the fretboard, because you can really start. That's why I can't play 8s. It's because I still have the touch of a blacksmith in my left hand. I'm still pretty heavy-handed, so for me, 8s, I'm pulling them out of tune left and right. So, yeah. Let's see here. Tristan, learning to use the pick and the last fingers on your right hand is a really tough thing for you. How can you improve that? Okay, this is really good. So hybrid picking. This idea of using the pick and your fingers in the picking hand here. Here's what I would tell you to do. Go watch Greg Koch play. Go watch Greg's videos. He's a master of this technique. As well as just about every other damn technique on guitar. Greg is Greg Koch is like one of the best guitar players alive today, and he's the sweetest guy. And everyone, go follow Greg Koch if you're not already on YouTube. He does live streams like every day, actually, where he plays live, and it's ridiculously good. So with the hybrid picking thing, take something that you already know that you're really familiar with. So take a lick that you can play in your sleep and use that to try and hybrid pick. So we'll just do like let's see, a really short 3 or 4 note lick, really simple, and pick it first. And then hybrid pick it. So what I'm going to do is do my hammer on here with the pick. And then this note, I'm going to use my middle finger on the second string and then go back to the pick. So I'm going to go. And and then add on to the lick very slowly. So go. And start alternating where you're picking with the actual pick, or the plectrum, as the English would say, and your fingers. So. You can also do this kind of like. Or like a. Like that kind of. Haven't practiced that in a while. I need to get my chops back together. Steve, thanks for the top chat, man. Appreciate it.
Steve Austin,
Stone Cold. I'm sure that's the first time he has ever gotten that joke. We're so original over here.
Yeah, I remember when I was younger, I was trying to learn, just
hang out with Stone Cold Steve Austin.
With Stone Cold Steve Austin, cool. I was trying to get better at picking. I was learning some like David Gilmour solo.
Yeah.
And I thought that I invented hybrid picking. I had never seen anyone do that, and I was like, "Wow, I can pick with my pick and my other finger." Like
a young jazz school Chris.
Dude, I thought I was a genius,
breaking down barriers over here before you even knew it. Wow.
I was like, "Wow, I should call that something."
I'm gonna call that the Chris. Oh, man. All right, cool. We'll take a couple more questions here. Don't forget, 35% off the Fretboard Fundamentals course. A lot of the topics we've covered in today's live stream go into more detail there. So 35% off via the link down below or in the top chat. And Fuzz Evangelist merch available for the first time ever and for a limited time, I believe. So go get yourself a t-shirt. Spread the good news. Spread the gospel. The germanium gospel. The silicon...
Way.
Oh, man. Let's see here. Any other questions? $10 million man. Any tips for switching between sweep picking and single note picking? No, because I can't sweep pick to save my life. I'm not
talk to Tony Campanovo.
Yeah,
about
go
that.
Talk to Tony Campanovo about how.
I actually took
pick.
a lesson with him about that.
Yeah,
it was great. He does online lessons. Go take a lesson.
Yeah,
with
Tony Campanovo on Instagram. You can go follow him. He's a monster guitar player and the nicest guy you could ever meet. He does online lessons.
He'll send you free PDFs.
And he will send you free PDFs.
Shout out.
All right, cool. Well, I think that's going to about do it today for us. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Been a great session. We will see y'all next week here on Tuesday Live. And really appreciate it, guys. Really appreciate the support. These live streams have been growing every single time. There's more and more people coming on. So I really, really love it. And we're having a ton of fun. We'll see y'all next week.